So how do you select the right vendor and software system through your RFP process? In this video, we're going to talk about how do you pick the right vendor or software system through an RFP process. So what goes into selecting the right vendor? You've done all of the hard work up to this point. You did the business process analysis. You came up with real strong detailed requirements. And then you put an RFP out that's been on the street for a couple of months, and you're expecting 5 or 6 vendors to respond, and you're hoping at the very end to get the right software and the right vendor relationship, because this is something that is going to be once in a lifetime, once in a career for a lot of government employees. So how do you go about picking the right vendor? I hate to sound like a broken record, but it all comes back to the requirements definition. It all comes back eventually to how do you define and design your future business processes. Because remember, when we did our business process redesign and mapping, that's what our requirements were based on. So you take the business process analysis, distill them to requirements, put that in an RFP with an efficient, well-written scope of work that goes out into the world and attracts software vendors to respond. When these proposals come in, we expect that the vendors will have checked off on your requirements. Yes, we can meet them. No, we can't meet them. This is going to be a customization. Some of them might say, hey, great idea. We're going to build this for you and it's going to cost you more. Good, bad, or ugly, we want to see what responses the vendors have to your requirements. Once those responses come in, it's your job as the city's project management team to go through every proposal in detail and, most importantly, see how they're responding, how the vendors are responding to your requirements. It's nothing but a checklist. Can your system do X, Y, and Z? And the vendor is responsible for saying yes, no, maybe, or it's a customizable feature. Then we're going to check those requests and the requirements against how the vendors responded, and every vendor will get a score. So let's say you have 2,000 requirements, the vendor can meet 1,500 of those, they get a percentage for how many of those they said yes to, how many did they say no to, and what's acceptable and not acceptable to us in terms of future developments, customizations, etc. Once you have that score, you'll have a good sense of which vendor can meet most of your requirements. Because keep in mind, some of our requirements may be pie in the sky, they may be too futuristic, and no vendor in the market can do that. And again, customizations are not necessarily good. You don't want too many customizations. So we want to go with the vendor that has the most features off the shelves that you can start using right away as soon as you're implemented. Once the vendor responds with their proposal and the requirements definitions filled out, you can then take that to shortlist a vendor. So let's say you got 10 different vendors come in to propose, and 3 vendors have the highest ranks in terms of requirements. You'll then take those vendors, call them in for a series of demos or a demo, depending on how many modules they're proposing on, and put them through the ringer. Now, the key point to make here is you can't just let the vendors come in and do a demo for you. Because if you let them just do that, then all you'll see is the bells and whistles, the features that are cool, and that may or may not fit your specific to-be processes. So it's important to give these vendors time to prepare on your processes, on what you want to see. And a really important part of that is coming up with a set of what we call demo scripts that are derived, again, from your business processes, your requirements, that become demo scripts. And the vendors then get to demo their system and show their wares based on your defined process, based on your test script, based on your demo script, and not just bells and whistles. So at the end of a 2-hour demo, if there is some time left, then you can have the vendor show you some cool features that may or may not be useful to you. In fact, we had one vendor that came in for a demo at a county client a few years ago. They could not meet most of the requirements. And what they ended up doing for the majority of the demo was they showed the system and how it can change colors and how you can change the fonts. Like, come on, that's not what we're here for. What can you do that's useful to our organization? And that gets defined through the RFP process, through the requirements process, and the vendors are then held accountable, not just during the demo process, but also through the implementation and the length of the contract. Think about it. When you design the house, there's an architectural drawing. The architect signs off on it. The contractor is supposed to build it to specifications. During the construction process, you can look at the specs, see what the contractor has done, and not approve a certain thing. after the contractor is done, you can still hold them accountable because they didn't build the house as designed. Similarly, in a software implementation, you can hold the vendors accountable, especially in a software as a service environment where you're not building something, you're subscribing to a software. So if it doesn't meet your requirements on an ongoing basis, you can use the requirements definition and that checklist as a contract compliance tool to really keep your vendors accountable in the long term. So coming back to how do you select the best vendor, it all comes back to how do you define your best future state. It comes down to how well defined your requirements are and how well you're keeping your vendor accountable through the implementation process and beyond. And a key point of this too is that, again, you need a project manager, you need a person or a team that's working on your best interests and keeping the vendor accountable for what they've promised and contracted to do. The requirements definition can also be a good tool for making sure you're not overpaying the vendor, that you're paying vendors based on certain milestones, and again, keeping that balance of payments in your favor. If you're in the process of looking for the next ERP vendor or software, if you're in the process of defining how that should work, we can help you. Get in touch. We've helped many government clients across the country implement ERP systems efficiently and under budget. Thank you.